Apologies for that. We had a little bit of technical difficulties there. Our next presentation is Enhancing Alma Finance Integration with GenAI. And we will be hearing from Andrew and Roshan, who are integral members of the Charles Sturt University Library team, who have brought many years of expertise to their roles. Andrew is the Manager of Information Resources and leads the content acquisitions and repository and also the metadata teams, while Roshan is the Discovery Services Coordinator and manages the library systems and integrations. Apologies again, Andrew and Roshan. We'll pass it on to you now.
Thank you. Thank you for the introduction. As you have introduced, we are presenting on enhancing Alma finance integration with GenAI, and Andrew and I will be taking you through the journey that we have taken to get this happen. First, okay, too many screens. Okay. First of all, acknowledgement of the country. We respectfully acknowledge the traditional owners and custodians of the lands on which we live and work together. Charles Sturt University and its staff pay respect to elders within First Nations communities and acknowledge the continuity of cultures, languages, leadership, and knowledge systems. We acknowledge First Nations people's continuous connection to country, recognizing the unique, diverse identities and cultures of peoples in our communities, regions, and nation. As such, we value the collaboration to strongly position First Nations peoples in our university through languages, leadership, cultures, knowledges, research, and ceremonies. Before we dive deep into our presentation, a bit of a background to our university. We are a regional university spread across New South Wales with 6 regional campuses and each having their own libraries. We had over 35,000 full-time students last year. We do have campuses in Melbourne and Sydney as metropolitan campuses run in the conjunction with Navitas. We also have some special campuses at Canberra, Goulburn, and Parramatta. And in regards to exclusive products, we do have a suite of products. We do have Alma, Primo VE, Leganto, Alma Digital, Rialto, Rapido, and Research Professional with research services. So yeah, in a typical superhero themed movies and stuff, I'm going to introduce our villain, and the villain is our foreign currency invoices within Alma. So a bit of background. Our library materials budget includes both subscriptions and one-off purchases. We typically manage over 200 individual subscription lines, including databases, journals, and print titles. And most of our subscription invoices are in foreign currency. In addition to processing in Alma, all foreign currency invoices are emailed to our Division of Finance for payment. Depending on the terms, these may be paid straight away or at any time before the invoice are due. So we don't know the exchange rate that's going to happen when that happens. Once the payment happens, we must manually transcribe the resulting Australian dollar invoice amount from Banner, which is our enterprise finance system, into Alma. So this is a time-consuming process, which includes the risks of human error because it's a manually operation and impacts on our ability to report on our library materials budget accurately. So what was the solution? The thing that we're looking for was full integration within the university, but that has been met with ongoing delays due to resource shortages and competing priorities. So as mere mortals, we set out to automate what we could without requiring resources from Division of Finance or the Division of Information Technology. So basically, Andrew and myself, talking with lots of other staff, started into this process. First of all, we looked into mapping all the steps that we did, talking with individual staff members. We were doing this process and looking at the Alma API within the developers platform to see how we can make this work. And this is what we came up with, defining our start to the end process. Lots of steps involved, going back and forth with lots of different areas. And now I'll hand over to Andrew to bring in our hero, for the rescue.
Thanks, Roshan. So our hero really was writing a Python script and utilizing the help of generative AI tools to generate that script. Um, Next slide, sorry, Roshan. So developing the Python script. So as Roshan said, we've taken the process map, and using that process map, we kind of chunked everything down into 4 steps. So we know we're getting all the finance data from Banner or from Fast. We need to use those, the invoice details. We needed to use the invoice details to retrieve the Alma data using the API. We then needed to break down that information down into line objects. And then we needed to do some calculations, update the records, and then re-upload them back into Alma. So I mentioned using GenAI. We decided rather than going full vibe coding, which is when you just ask GenAI to write everything for you, we used a bit of a hybrid approach. So because obviously using GenAI, there were some security and risk factors. So we made sure that we weren't uploading any personal or confidential information, such as API keys. So even though we do have access to an enterprise GenAI tool, which is Microsoft Copilot, we nonetheless kind of used a variety of different tools, and so making sure that security was locked down. Now, the reason we went with Python, we're not developers as such, but we do know the basics. So we wrote what we could, and when we sort of came across barriers or obstacles, we often turned to GenAI, which, previous iterations, whenever we get stuck, we tend to go to Stack Overflow, but GenAI really helped cut down the trawling through threads to try and find out what code would work. I did mention GenAI. One thing I would like to note is that it did steer us in the right direction sometimes, but it also steered us in the wrong direction. So having that knowledge between us really helped to identify when GenAI wasn't really helping us the way we wanted it to. Now, a superhero story isn't complete without overcoming adversity, and we certainly had our fair share of that. So some of the issues that we encountered throughout the project, matching invoice numbers between systems. Really, the invoice number is the only common piece of data between the library systems and the finance systems. The problem there is the invoice numbers are not always unique. So to overcome that, we had to build in a bit of a time frame so that we're only looking at recent invoice numbers. Breaking down the invoice totals into individual lines. So when we pull the data from Banner Finance, it's all in AUD, but the invoice data in the library management system is all in the foreign currency. So in order to calculate what the individual line items were, we had to do a bit of calculation using ratios. Unfortunately, the finance system doesn't break it down to line level. Once we matched the invoice numbers using between the finance system and the library system, we then pulled down the individual invoice line records and then calculated what ratio the line was to the total. Another problem that we encountered was the GST being added automatically. Now we found out that there is a tick box in the vendor record that determines whether GST is added automatically to invoices. Now, some of the vendors, we have some invoices in AUD, some invoices in foreign currency. So for those vendors, unfortunately, all the foreign currency invoices also have GST added, which kind of throws a bit of a spanner in the works. We found that out quite late by seeing that all our invoice totals for those vendors were 10% out. So we had to figure out a way of adjusting the invoice totals if GST was incorrectly added. Next one was ignoring any invoice lines that had already been pre-populated. So initially we were just going to not touch those, but then after the issue with the GST was discovered, we then figured that we had to go back and correct a lot of them. So we had to modify the script somewhat to overwrite existing fields instead of just ignoring them. Another issue that we had in the Python script, we were using XML to break down the invoice line objects into the various fields. Unfortunately, Alma was not particularly happy when we tried to re-upload those records once it had been transformed into XML. So we had to get a little bit creative, and instead of breaking it down into XML first, we just identified the price note field using regular expressions. Actually, this is where GenAI came in really handy, because my regular expressions knowledge is somewhat limited. And then after all that, we also had to produce human readable exports for verification. So this is a bit of an audit trail. Whilst the script pretty much does everything, if there was any problems, it really helped to have those manual files to go through and identify where potential issues occurred. And the other issue, as I mentioned, using GenAI tools, it was really interesting to see that different tools produced different suggestions as well. So, like I said, we've got the enterprise version of Copilot, but I'd have to say that was probably the least helpful out of all the tools. Claude was probably my go-to, but ChatGPT and Google Gemini also did a good job. Just the next slide, sorry, Roshan. So at the end of the day, what we achieved, and the question of whether the villain will return. So the benefits that we realized, ultimately, it's not a full integration, as Roshan said. Ideally, the systems would just talk to each other and everything would just be perfect. But yeah, without the help of our IT or our finance division, we automated what we could. It's really just a small step, but we actually achieved some really big results. So obviously there was the elimination of the manual data transcription. So it saves a lot of staff time and reduces a lot of the transcription errors that we had before. So obviously this improved the accuracy and reliability of our financial reporting, and it really allows us to get super accurate budget expenditure reports. So obviously saving the manual time allows staff to focus on higher value tasks. I know we're all sort of facing budget restrictions and recruitment freezes and things like this. So being able to remove some of that busy work for our staff has really helped. Obviously for Roshan and I, builds confidence in our skills for future process improvement through system automation. And it provides obviously a good foundation when the university enterprise system is migrated to a new platform, which we expect will be happening soon. So there is a very likely possibility that the villain will return in the future. But hopefully this puts us in good stead for that time. So thank you everyone for listening, and if anyone's got any questions, happy to answer them now.
So far, I don't see any questions, just comments. Alan said that's a great model, automating the Stack Overflow search. And Deborah said that she does quite enjoy some of the Stack Overflow threads where people share their very strong opinions, capitalized, very strong opinions. And Hugh said, yes, Hugh said, it's interesting that Copilot was the worst given all that GitHub experience.
yeah, you'd think it would be one of the best, but yeah, I found it was always, yeah, not great.
We did just get one question come through from Catherine. Were there any initial hesitations from your finance or IT teams about your method?
Yeah, good question, Catherine. So finance weren't terribly fussed at all because we weren't modifying any data on their side. We were just grabbing data out of the system and then just updating the library system with it. So they were quite happy with it. IT teams were a little bit hesitant, but yeah, I went through the risks with them and just explained the process that we were going to follow, and obviously advised them of all the risks and the security concerns that we had and how we were managing that. And in the end, they were quite happy. Yeah, for us to go ahead.